Hello everyone, my name is Erica Doring and this is my final project for Harvard Extension School's Big Data Analytics CSCI E63 in spring of 2014. My topic for my final project was Big Data Case Study in Social Media, and for my project I chose to focus on Twitter. Firstly, I wanted to ask, why is social media a big data problem, or a topic that we're interested in exploring? So sites like Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest have millions of users creating and consuming huge amounts of data every day. Users on Facebook upload and download photos, post statuses, Twitter posts tweets, retweets, share news. Businesses can monetize this data by understanding it. So I was looking into whether to explore Twitter versus Facebook for this project, or perhaps both. So Twitter is one of the largest and most active social media sites in the United States. It has 255 million monthly active users. 18% of all internet users have accounts on Twitter. 500 million tweets are sent per day. So the data about the monthly active users and the million tweets are from Twitter's website, and the 18% of all internet users statistic come from a Pew Research study. Looking into Facebook, Facebook is the largest social networking site. Unfortunately, for purposes of this project, the API doesn't really allow for us to explore much. You can only really see data about your own friends and network, which isn't ideal for business intelligence. That is, unless you're an established business analyzing your existing fan-friend base. The Twitter API, on the other hand, is pretty open. Most tweets are public, so it lets you download pretty much whatever you want, which is great for our purposes. If you're, say, a company that's interested in exploring big data questions about customers that are out there but may not necessarily be your fans on a business page. So in summary, this project, we're going to focus on Twitter. Twitter's API comes in three flavors. There's the Search API, the Streaming API, and the Firehose API. The Search API lets you enter queries to retrieve data from about 4 days back. You can usually collect up to about 5,000 tweets per keyword. It's kind of the same thing as if you were to open up Twitter and just enter a search query in the box and then hit all. Streaming lets you collect a live stream of tweets based on search terms. The drawbacks to this API include the fact that you have to store your own tweets. Rather than like with search, you could just enter it and get the tweets that you wanted and then use them at that time. You also only get a sample of tweets, between 1% and 40% depending on how many users are on Twitter and Twitter's data demands. The Firehose API is like streaming, but with guaranteed delivery. You get 100% of the tweets that match your search terms. Unfortunately, the API is not free. So when I was deciding which one to use for my project, I found that the 5,000 tweet limit for the Search API isn't quite enough for us. I wanted more of a data set. We don't really want to pay, so I went with the Streaming API. I did actually write a script that scrapes the Search API if you're interested in playing with it. So for this project, I wanted to look into a few questions. The situation is, a business executive from Reebok CrossFit comes to you and asks, what are people tweeting about in relation to CrossFit? If you're not familiar, CrossFit is kind of a fitness brand that was started back in 2007, I believe, where it mixes gymnastics and bodybuilding and weightlifting. It's quite a popular way to stay in shape. Reebok bought the brand a few years ago, and I'm sure they've been going crazy with marketing campaigns trying to make it even more popular. So I was imagining, since it's a topic I'm personally interested in, if an executive came to me, a big data scientist, and asked with the umbrella question, what are people tweeting about in relation to CrossFit? You come up with a few sub-questions to try to answer that. Firstly, just for general brand awareness, what are the top words used in tweets about CrossFit? What are people talking about? What are the top hashtags in tweets about CrossFit? And then a few specific industry questions. So like, what % of tweets about CrossFit mention injury? It's kind of this common conception that to people who don't do CrossFit, that CrossFit will just cause you injury because you lift too much weight too fast, or there's improper coaching. So maybe an executive might be interested to see what people have to say about that. Another question might be, what % of tweets mention the Reebok Nano, which is a shoe that Reebok has released recently specifically for CrossFit. So maybe we can see what people are saying about that. What % of tweets about CrossFit mention the regional games? So every year there's a nationwide and an international competition called the CrossFit Games where people go and compete in this athletic event. There's also regionals in the meantime where there's a bunch of smaller regions that people compete in before they can go to the international games. So to answer these questions, I looked into some technologies and ended up deciding to use R, Hadoop, and Hive. R is really suited well for all 5 questions. We can use a package called Streamr to connect to the streaming API, load the data right into a data frame, and then kind of query it from there using some commands in R. So that ended up being pretty straightforward. We can use Hadoop to answer the general brand awareness questions. We can do word counts. We've done this in assignments before, and I decided to do it again for this project using, oh, sorry, there's a motorcycle outside. We decided to use the Hadoop programming to do a R streaming program. Awareness questions, we can use Hive to answer the specific industry questions. These are kind of queries that are similar to R, but they're styled in different ways. So in order to connect to the Twitter streaming or search API, you have to use Twitter OAuth, which stands for Authentication Protocol. You have to have a Twitter user account and a Twitter developer account. I go through the details of setting that up in my demo instruction, if you're interested in doing this yourself. So after creating these, we can write an R script to connect to the streaming API using the package streamr. Once streamed, the tweets are saved into a .json file, which is a text file that transmits data objects like tweet info into a human-readable format. For this project, we're only really interested in screen name and text fields. But as you can see from the little snapshot I've included, there's a lot of stuff that's included in here that you could potentially query. So we learned about R in lecture. I'll just go over it quickly again. It's an extremely powerful open source statistical software and programming languages. There were so many handy packages for tweet analytics. Streamr for the streaming API, TwitR for the search API. The TM package stands for text mining, and StringR package ended up being super useful for my debugging purposes. R is really popular in the data science world, so I found myself being interested to get some more practice with it. And like I said before, answering all 5 of those questions in a matter of seconds, querying data frames. Hadoop we also spent quite a bit of time on in our class. It's extremely powerful MapReduce software. It's good for huge unstructured data. So oftentimes the map program can help reformat the data, or it can do a sum or a count, as we've done in class. The disadvantage I found is it's more difficult to program in something like SQL. If you can load the data into something like a SQL database or a Hive, which I'll talk about in a second, then oftentimes it's easier for business analyst intelligence to write queries rather than MapReduce programs for answering every question you have. For the purposes of the project, I found writing, testing, and implementing MapReduce program to be more time-consuming than it was worth for the size of my dataset, which was about 25,000 tweets, or rows. Writing the R command to extract the same information took a fraction of the time, and it didn't require uploading and downloading into HDFS. So just taking a quick look at the Hive and R outputs. If you look at the tweets data frame, then you can see there's a screen name. Hannah Scott 23 is one of them. CrossFit Siren is one of them. And you can see the text of the tweet after that. In the Hive table, I selected the tweet from tweets, and I got the top 5 of them. So I just got the tweet text here. As you can see, it runs a MapReduce program to take out your query. I could have written like map.r and reduce.r to do this, but it seemed much faster just to query Hive. So to dive into Hive a little more, it's part of Hadoop's software suite. It turned out to be an extremely useful counterpart to Hadoop's base. After loading into data into Hive, I found it pretty easy to query and answer the same questions we could in R, but with SQL-style queries, which I might even argue are more intuitive than R. The disadvantage include having to load the files into the table, which actually ended up being a little bit of a technical hitch just because there were new line characters in some of the tweets, and when I was printing out to a text file for Hive to read in, then the new line characters treated themselves as new tweets, so I had to do a little finagling with the text in R before I could export it out to Hive. But overall, it was relatively painless. So for our general brand awareness, I did both R and Hadoop to check out the top tweets and the top hashtags. Here's some of the top words that were used in tweets. So RT means retweet. At CrossFit means that you're at CrossFit working out. The rest of these aren't super interesting. I guess there's fitness right here, which is always good to see. Today, maybe meaning people are taking action and they're doing things today, which the executive would be happy to hear. Regionals is up there, which is great that people are aware that's going on. AMP, I'm not sure what that means, but I'm guessing it means like get amped up. We have get here, AMP. Maybe they're in the same tweets. We also wanted to look at the top hashtags. We're happy to see that CrossFit Games is up there. We're happy to see that the Reebok CrossFit Nano, the shoe I mentioned before, is there. There's regionals. Here's FitFam. Maybe that means you could launch a marketing campaign about, families getting fit together if there isn't already something like that. Camaraderie, that's another thing you could potentially use for marketing. So we could definitely dive into those tweets a little more and see what they say and what people are expressing their opinions about. For industry-specific questions, we looked at R and Hive together about the word injury being mentioned in tweets. Most tweets that mention injury seem to be focused on preventing injury, but there are a few warriors who mentioned their battle wounds. There was some, most of the tweets did focus on preventing injury, but there were a few hateful ones at the beginning by Chris CrossFit, I guess, who mentioned that he thinks that CrossFit is gay, which I think is, maybe not the most mature way to say it, but hey, you're allowed to express your opinion. The ones on the bottom are people that are the wounded warriors, so Achilles heel injury sounds pretty painful, and I guess the other person had to go to the hospital for their CrossFit injury, which is super unfortunate. So maybe we could dig into those tweets a little more, see what people are specifically saying, what kind of injuries they have, and how we can prevent that. Looking into the the tweets that mention Nano, you see that people seem pretty happy with it. They're making me quiver in anticipation. That's always a good thing to hear about a product you've released. So in summary, the Streamer package was a great and simple way to connect to R and the API. I found it pretty seamless. And Hive and R are both extremely useful for ad hoc queries. I found Hadoop to be a little bit too much for this project, but was thankful for the extra practice with it anyway. Thank you to the Big Data teaching staff for a wonderful semester. I'm really looking forward to applying everything I learned in the future, and maybe some next steps with this project might be interesting to look into some more databases, expanding my Hive database, and even just collecting more tweets on this topic to get some more data. All right, thank you very much.